Hey guys, for today's video, I'll be going over the Herta's kits, relics, ornaments, Lightcones, teams, and Eidolons to show you how to properly build her. Starting off with her skill, it states that it deals ice damage equal to 70% of the Herta's attack to one designated enemy and its adjacent enemies, and inflicts 1 stack of interpretation on the designated enemy. This skill is going to be decent for implanting interpretation stacks and for regenerating ultimate energy, which are the two things that the Herta wants the most. For her ultimate, it states that it rearranges the number of interpretation stacks on all enemies, prioritizing the transfer of a higher number of interpretation stacks to elite level targets and above, which will be beneficial because this will make it so that the majority of the Herta's enhanced skill damage goes to the enemy with the most HP instead of overcapping on a low HP enemy, like how Acheron's ultimate typically does when you accidentally inflict debuffs on a low HP enemy. It also states that after rearranging the number of interpretation stacks, her ultimate deals ice damage equal to 200% of the Herta's attack to all enemies, and when using her ultimate, increases the Herta's attack by 80%, lasting for 3 turns, which won't result in too much damage, but the attack percentage is actually pretty insane. It also states that after using her ultimate, the Herta immediately takes action and gains 1 stack of inspiration. Inspiration can stack up to 4 times, and while having inspiration, her skill is enhanced. Okay, so even though rearranging the inspiration stacks to prioritize an elite level enemy or above, an 80% attack boost and a 100% advance forward would have already made her a meta DPS, the only addition in this ultimate that truly matters is the addition that enhances her regular skill. This is because her enhanced skill is absolutely busted, and this would give her the #1 DPS title for a while after she released. Her enhanced skill states that the Herta consumes 1 stack of inspiration, deals ice damage equal to 80% of the Herta's attack to one designated enemy, and inflicts 1 stack of interpretation. It then deals ice damage equal to 80% of the Herta's attack to the target hit by this instance of skill and its adjacent targets, repeating 2 times. Finally, it deals ice damage equal to 40% of the Herta's attack to all enemies, which are a lot of hits that equates to damage equal to 280% of the Herta's attack being done to the designated targets and its adjacent targets, which are pretty good multipliers. But these pretty good multipliers aren't why her enhanced skill is so powerful. Her enhanced skill is so powerful because of the buffs that her talent provides it with. Her talent states that when the enemy enters battle, the Herta inflicts 1 stack of interpretation on them, and at the start of each wave, she applies 25 stacks of interpretation to a random enemy target, prioritizing elite enemy targets or higher, which is nice for rotation startup, but this obviously still isn't why her enhanced skill is so powerful. The only reason her enhanced skill is so powerful is because her talent then states that when the enhanced skill's primary target has interpretation, the multiplier for the damage dealt increases with each stack, granting an increase of 8% or 4% on the primary target or other targets respectively. And if 2 or more characters are Erudition characters in the team, each stack grants an additional increase of 8% or 4% on the primary targets or other targets respectively, and interpretation stacks can stack up to 42 times. You see, if we assume that the Herta is being ran with another Erudition character, which you definitely should, once the designated enemy has 42 interpretation stacks, her enhanced skill will no longer do damage equal to 280% of the Herta's attack, but rather it's gonna do damage equal to 952% of the Herta's attack, which is a 240% increase to her enhanced skills' multipliers to the designated enemy, and she's gonna do damage equal to 616 of the Herta's attack to the designated target's adjacent enemies, which is a 120% increase to her enhanced skills multipliers to the designated target's adjacent enemies. This is why she was so broken at release, because she's able to do enhanced skills with multipliers this high while also getting an 80% attack boost on top of that, and an 80% crit damage boost and 50% ice damage boost as well, which I'll go over how to get in a bit. Anyways, it also states that when using the enhanced skill, it resets the number of interpretation stacks on the primary target to 1, which pretty much just means your rotation has been restarted. It also states that after the enemy target leaves the battle or gets defeated by any units, interpretation stacks will be transferred, prioritizing the transfer to elite level targets and above, which is a really good addition for multi-wave scenarios, aka Pure Fiction, the game mode that the Herta dominates in. Onto her major traces, her first major trace states that when an ally target attacks, they inflict 1 stack of interpretation on the hit enemy targets. After attacking, for every one target hit by this attack, it regenerates 3 fixed energy for the Herta, counting up to a maximum of 5 targets, which means that the maximum amount of energy that the Herta can get here is 15, independent of her ERR stats. Also, when using her enhanced skill, and if the primary target's interpretation stack reaches 42, it increases ice damage dealt by the Herta by 50% until the end of this attack, which again is another really powerful amplifying effect that is insane considering her multipliers. For her other traits, it states that when entering battle, if the team has 2 or more Erudition characters, then all allies' crit damage is increased by 80%, which again is insane considering her multipliers. It also states that it applies 1 stack of interpretation to the target that has the highest current interpretation stacks when attacking a maximum of 3 enemies, which means that as long as you have 2 Erudition characters, you'll be able to apply 1 more interpretation stack per attack whenever you attack a maximum of 3 enemies. And it additionally applies 2 stacks of interpretation if the attacker is an Erudition character, which just doubles the efficiency of this interpretation stack application method if the character attacking is an Erudition character. For her other traits, it states that for every 1 stack of interpretation inflicted on enemy targets, the Herta gains 1 stack of answer, up to 99 stacks. When using her ultimate, every stack of answer increases the ultimate's damage multiplier by 1%, which is pretty useful considering her ultimate damage multipliers aren't that insane against 3 targets compared to her enhanced skill multipliers. So what does all of this information actually mean? Well, all it means is that to maximize the Herta's damage, the team needs to have at least 1 Erudition character so that her trace can give 80% crit damage to all allies, and so that the Herta can get more interpretation stacks from the Erudition character's ability to target more enemies than your typical character. Also, applying interpretation stacks will be important because once you reach 42 interpretation stacks on an enemy, they'll have the maximum amount of stacks you need to maximize your enhanced skills damage after you use the Herta's ultimate. For her relics, she's gonna want the Scholar set because it provides 8% crit rates, which helps to even out the 80% crit damage she provides, and it increases ultimate damage by 20% and skill damage by 45%, which will be incredibly good because the majority of her damage comes from these sources. Another good relic would be the Glacier relic, since it provides 10% ice damage and a whopping 25% crit damage. For another good relic set, any mixture of 2-piece bonuses that provide damage dealt, attack percentage, or crits would be good. For her planners, the Izumo set would be the best, since it provides a 12% attack boost and a 12% crit rate boost if the team has another Erudition character, which her teams should typically have. Another good planner would be the Rudolin Arena because it provides 8% crit rates, which will help even out the 80% crit damage her trace provides, and 20% skill damage, which is good because the majority of her damage comes from her skill. For another good planner, the Glimov set would be good because it provides her with 12% attack and 12% damage dealt when her speed is at or above 135. For another planner set, the Sealing Space Station would also be good because it provides 24% attack. For another planner set, the Sigonia set would be more powerful than even the Izumo set in multi-wave scenarios because it provides 4% crit rates and 40% crit damage when defeating 10 enemies, but it would still only be a good alternative in other scenarios. For her main stats, you're gonna want crits on her chest, then attack percentage or speed on her boots, typically ice damage over attack percentage for her sphere, and attack percentage for her rope. For her substats, you're gonna want to prioritize getting crits, then attack percentage, then speed. For her Lightcones, her signature is going to be her best because it provides her with 12% crit rates, 60% damage dealt for her skill and ultimates, and it recovers 1 skill point every time she uses her ultimates, which are literally the same buffs as the Scholar sets but on steroids, and it provides a free skill point, which is typically really powerful. For another option, the Peaceful Day Lightcone will be her second best alternative at Super Imposition 5, but only an average option at Super Imposition 1. It provides 0.2% or 0.4% damage dealt depending on its super imposition per point of energy the user's ultimate has, up to 160 energy. Thus, the Herta can either get 32% damage dealt or 64% damage dealt depending on the super imposition of this Lightcone. Another good option would be Argentis' signature, since it provides 36% crit damage and 0.36% damage dealt to the user's ultimate per point of energy the user's ultimate has, up to 180 180 points. Another good option would be Jinjuan's signature, because it provides 36% crit damage and 18% damage dealt for the user's skill and ultimate, which is how the Herta does the majority of her damage. For another option, the Genius's Repose would also be good because it increases the user's attack by 32% and crit damage by 48%. For another option, Himiko's signature would be really powerful in multi-wave scenarios, but below average in other scenarios. It provides 9% attack for every enemy on the field and 30% damage dealt for one turn after weakness breaking an enemy. For another option, the Seriousness of Breakfast would be good because it provides 24% damage dealt and 24% attack, which is a nice ratio of damage dealt and attack percentage. For another option, the Cosmos would be good because it provides 24% attack and 40% crit damage when at least 2 enemies have the corresponding weakness, which would make this Lightcone average, but because the crit damage provided by this Lightcone is pretty conditional, it'll typically be the Herta's worst option. For her teammates, the Herta is going to typically need a sustainer that can consistently attack enemies, another Erudition character, and either an AoE buffer or single target buffer depending on how much DPS the Erudition character is contributing to the team's DPS. For example, if you're running a premium the Herta team with the Herta and the Naxa as your Erudition character, you'll typically want Tribby, Robin, Silverwolf, or Cypher instead of Sunday or RMC because characters like Tribby can buff both the Herta and the Naxxus's powerful sub-DPS damage, whereas Sunday and RMC can only buff the Herta. But if you're running a budget the Herta team with Mini Herta as your Erudition character, well then you're better off running Sunday or RMC instead of characters like Tribby, so that the Herta's incredibly powerful personal damage can be amplified. Anyways, for her Erudition characters, Anaxa is going to be the best, with Jade's performance being close to Anaxa, Argenti being a mediocre pick, and Mini Herta and Serval being budget picks. For Anaxa is going to be incredibly powerful with the Herta because he can provide powerful sub-DPS, 50% damage dealt to all allies with this major trace, and can do his 5 enemy targeting skill twice, which can provide up to 30 energy for the Herta per use and up to 16 interpretation stacks per use. For Jade's sub-DPS is actually even better than Anaxa's, and she can do follow-up attacks that apply up to 8 interpretation stacks per use. And then Argenti, Mini Herta, and Serval only synergize with the Herta because they are Erudition characters. For your AoE supports, Tribby is going to be the best, since her buffs are the best of the best, and she can consistently do follow-up attacks that target all enemies, which are extremely good for regenerating energy and applying interpretation stacks for the Herta. Not only that, but with the triple D Lightcone, she can advance allies forward by 24%, which is really good for pretty much everything. For the other AoE supports, Robin is good because she can advance allies by 100% with her ultimate, and Cypher is good because she can do a follow-up attack every turn. Other than that though, every meta AoE support will be good simply because they provide really good AoE buffs. For your single target supports, Sunday and RMC would be the best, with Bronya and Xingyun being budget options. For Sunday can provide a ton of crit stats, damage dealt, and advance forwards, but he's extremely powerful with the Herta because he can provide a ton of energy. For RMC, the Herta synergizes really well with him because she regenerates a lot of energy, which helps regenerate a ton of charge for Mem. Her ultimate also costs a lot of energy, which helps to max out the really powerful true damage buff that RMC provides, and unlike other single target supports, RMC has Mem, who can sometimes do AoE attacks that help with stacking interpretation stacks. For Bronya, she can provide a ton of attack percentage, damage dealt, and crit damage stats, and for Xingyun, she can provide decent damage dealt buffs, a ton of attack percentage, and a ton of energy, which the Herta really wants. For sustainers, Hyacinth, Lingsha, and Aventurine will all be good, because they're the only good sustainers that can consistently target multiple enemies with their attacks. For her Eidolons, her E1 states that when her enhanced skill calculates interpretation, additionally calculates 50% of the interpretation stacks on the one target, with the highest stacks out of the primary targets and its adjacent targets. And when using her enhanced skill to reset interpretation, it resets the stack number to 15 instead of 1. This Eidolon is really powerful and will increase the Herta Herta's DPS by 21%, because it'll increase the damage boost provided from the interpretation stacks by 50% when dealing damage to what will typically be the designated targets. It'll also pretty much always allow the Herta to already be done with 30% of her rotation, since the 15 interpretation stacks this Eidolon provides is around 30% of 42 interpretation stacks, which is how many interpretation stacks you should have on the designated enemy before using her ultimate, and then her enhanced skill, which marks the end of the Herta's rotation. For her E2, it states that after the Herta enters battle and uses her ultimate, she additionally gains 1 stack of inspiration, which is pretty insane since this means that the Herta's optimal usage of her enhanced skill won't be restricted to whether she has inspiration stacks or not, which is pretty hard to get at E2 or below, but rather it'll be restricted to whether the enemy has enough interpretation stacks, which is far easier to do at E1 or above than it is to obtain inspiration stacks at E2 or below. So the Herta's optimal usage of her enhanced skill, aka her main source of damage, will skyrocket. It also states that after using her enhanced skill, the Herta's subsequent action is advanced by 35%, which is really good for starting her rotation back up. This Eidolon is actually insane and is one of the most sought after Eidolons since it increases the Herta's DPS by around 87% in scenarios where she can consistently target 5 enemies and doesn't have her signature, and even in scenarios where she can consistently target only 1 enemy and she does have her signature, this Eidolon will still increase her DPS by around 71%. For her E4, it states that the speed of Erudition characters in the team increases by 12%, which is helpful for speed tuning relics, but like most other E4s, this Eidolon is just a stepping stone for E6. For her E6, it states that the Herta's Ice Rest Pen increases by 20%, and when the number of enemy targets on the field is 3 or more, 2 or 1, her ultimate's damage multiplier increases by 140%, 250%, or 400% respectively. This Eidolon is ironically going to typically increase the Herta's DPS less than her E2, but it will help her tremendously in single target scenarios, to the point where the increase this Eidolon provides to the Herta's DPS will sometimes be as good as her E2 in single target scenarios, aka 74%. But yeah, in 5 target scenarios, this Eidolon will only increase the Herta's damage by 66%, which is still really powerful, but relative to her E2, it's around 25% worse. For my investment recommendations, I would recommend going for her E1, then her E2, then her Sig. This is because her E1 increases the Herta's DPS by just as much as her Sig, and her E1 acts as a stepping stone to the Herta's legendary E2, while the Sig doesn't and has plenty of other powerful alternatives. So after going over all of this information, should you summon on the Herta? Well, even though the Herta is a meta main DPS, recently her performance has dropped in endgame content because there hasn't been that many phases with a lot of targets. Thus, I would only summon on the Herta if you need a meta main DPS, if you need an AoE DPS, since her DPS in 5 target scenarios is around 40% higher than other meta main DPS, or if your Herta is at E1, since her E2 is crazy good. Anyways, that's all I've got for today. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If you have anything you wish to say, feel free to leave it down in comments below. I would greatly appreciate it. Goodbye.